always a good feature is when we're joined by John McDaid, who's a coordinator of football officials for the SEC, and he's here to give us some time, and we'll go straight to questions. We'll start over here on the right side on the fourth row.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. How are you, John?
I'm doing great.
Glad to hear it. I was listening to your talk in the big room, and you talked about the delay of game defensive penalty. I think back to a game I covered last year with LSU and Missouri. There was an incident with a player clapping about 7 yards off the ball, and that was deemed delay of game because LSU, I guess, it designated the clapping as their signal. I'm curious if there's any change to, any talk with officials about how you designate impersonation of a signal versus, just a standard operating procedure. And then has there been any voice given to protecting more than one signal offensively as opposed to the now rule where you can protect either, a word, a phrase, or the clap?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is you go into the playing rules, it talks about the signal you use for your cadence. And it doesn't say this explicitly. You have to interpret it. But as an offense, you only have one signal. You may use some huts and Omahas or whatever the case may be, but ultimately if you're using the clap as your cadence to snap the ball, that's your signal, the clap, right? So I asked our officials to do two things. Friday night, look at the two teams from previous weeks, what signal are they using? And then that first offensive possession for each of the teams, confirm that they're still using that first signal. So that's the answer to one of your questions. The guidelines we give them for clapping is that if it's a traditional clap, right, we don't need to hear it. And in some of our stadiums, you're not going to hear it, right? If you see them with a traditional clap as a defensive player anywhere on the field, and we have confirmed that the offense is using the clap as their offensive cadence, the signal to snap the ball, it's a foul. I'm going to admit to you, we miss it just as much as we see it. It's a very difficult thing to get to if it's not directly at the line of scrimmage or of the offensive formation, because the honest truth is mechanically what we're doing pre-snap, we're not accounting for all 11 defensive players to make sure they don't clap prior, right? If they do anything else that potentially could create a clapping sound, we've seen defensive players doing this or doing this, or we've seen there's some ingenuity that's used. We've seen a linebacker come up and smack the butt of a teammate who's a defensive lineman as if to try to move him over a gap or a half gap, and in doing that, it creates a clapping sound. We will, if it's traditional clap, it's a foul each and every time that we observe it, because we want to create a deterrent. We want to create a deterrent, not do it. And to be honest with you, in all the clappings that I see, more than 50% of the time, it's not intentional, right? There's a reason they use the clap on the offensive side of the ball for the cadence. It's one of the few things you can do that you can hear over 80 to 100,000 people. Well, guess what? The defensive player is doing the same thing. He's frustrated. He's trying to communicate to a teammate, and he just resorts to the clap subconsciously and gets himself in trouble. Let me point one. Why do we call a clap anywhere on the defensive side of the ball? We created a false start 2 seasons ago by a coach on the sideline clapping. And again, I have no reason to believe it was intentional. He was just trying to get the attention of one of his defensive players, and we had the offense react. Clap's pretty powerful. It's one of the few sounds that you can make as a human to be heard over 80 to 100,000 people.
Right here.
Hey, John, this may not be of wide interest to a lot of people around the SEC country right now, but Texas coming into the league, a lot of Sooners wondering about horns down. Is there a stance on what your officials will call moving forward on that?
Yeah, if it's going to be an issue, the signal, it's going to be under the playing rules for unsportsmanlike conduct. And we've talked a lot about that in our officiating group since I've taken over in the 2020 season. And to be unsportsmanlike conduct, I'm asking my officials to use a framework of judgment where the act to be a foul needs to be in one of 3 buckets. It needs to be taunting an opponent, it needs to be a travesty of the game, or it needs to otherwise compromise our ability to manage the game. What's a travesty of the game, right? It's just a phrase. I ask my officials, the act itself needs to be offending to the senses. if you took that act out of a football stadium and did it in a shopping mall or a grocery store, would it offend the senses to a majority of the reasonable people in the area, right? That signal would not, right? You might have some people that share that signal with you if you did that at a grocery store or in a shopping mall, depending where you are. So it's very much we're going to evaluate it in context. I could see a scenario. I want to be very cautious about using hypotheticals, right? But I could see a scenario where an opponent of Texas makes a big play in celebrating with his teammates, possibly going back to the sideline. They're giving the signal. It's not taunting. It's not making a travesty of the game. It's not affecting our ability to manage the game.
Second row.
Yeah, Barry Trammell, Tulsa World. John, I've heard some talk about perhaps the power conferences consolidating officiating rather than having each having its own officiating crew and oversight and all those things. Where are we at in those kinds of talks, and what do you know about that?
It's a topic that's batted around every once in a while. Here's where I see the challenge is. Football's a unique sport in that we play once a week. We have 6 off days. The ratio of off days to game days is 6-1. And we use those 6 days, whether it be at the National Football League or at the college level, we use those 6 days to evaluate our officials. We spend a good 72 to 96 hours hiring individuals that have had long careers to evaluate, grade the film, and give feedback to our officials every week. We don't do that in basketball, as an example. There's just too many games, right? You don't have enough downtime between games to pour through the entire 40 minutes of a men's college basketball game, or I believe it's 48 minutes in a women's college basketball game, to evaluate officials like that. In football, we do that. Why do I bring this up? I have a part of the officiating program, not only the SEC, but the officials for the Sun Belt and the officials for the Southern Conference. And since I took over in 2020, where there was 14 teams in the SEC, 10 teams in the Sun Belt, 24 total teams, I've tried to curate the same evaluation system week in and week out for all of my SEC and Sun Belt officials, because it helps my Sun Belt officials develop to potentially become promotable in the SEC. As the Sun Belt has gone from 10 to 14 teams, and now as the SEC has gone from 14 to 16 teams, I have 30 total teams, and I've gone from 14 to 17 total crews, and I'm trying to scale that same evaluation system, and we're breaking at the seams. I can barely scale it to make it work. So if we were to have a national organization that account for, I don't know what the number would be, but it would be much higher than 17 crews, and given there was, just doing some quick math, probably 55 to 60 games that could be played in a given week, what kind of consistency could you have in your evaluation system for those officials across the nation? That would be an extremely tough endeavor. Even the National Football League knows that it's not going to have any more than 17 games with 17 crews in any given week throughout their entire season. That, to me, is the challenge.
Left side, third row.
Tyler Shaw with KBTX in College Station. Going back to the Texas thing, just to clarify, I know you said you don't like going to the hypotheticals, but there would be instances where horns down would not be considered.
Yeah, I was just asked this question walking over here, and I think it puts it in interesting perspective, so I'll repeat the question and my answer. This isn't a new scenario to the SEC. We have a team that has a gator chomp. We have a team that uses the shark fin for stellar defensive play. And we've had, over the years, opponents of those teams using those signals to be derogatory in their stance, correct? I joined the SEC as an on-field official in 2015. And so I've had now 9 seasons affiliated with the SEC where I was on the field or in this capacity as a coordinator of football officials. There are less than the fingers on one of your hands that I can remember creating an unsportsmanlike conduct foul for using an opponent's signal in a derogatory manner. It's not that it only happened less than 5 times over that period of time. It's just that contextually it didn't create taunting or it didn't create a travesty of the game. Is that fair?
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
On the aisle. You have a question on the left? You don't? Okay, we'll go right here to the front.
Eric Bailey with the Tulsa World. With 2 new schools in the conference, you're going to meet some new personalities in terms of coaches. Oklahoma has a coach that's really has an active personality on the sidelines. As referees and officials, you adapt to their personality, get to know them as they get integrated into the conference. And then with a stadium in Oklahoma, the sidelines are narrow and sideline warnings come into effect. How do you as officials relate to new personalities, new venues?
Yeah. The different personalities is the goodness in it all, right? It makes it fun. I tell my officials, look, the expectation is that you're going to be able to create rapport with the coaches. It might not be a relationship. It might develop into a relationship. But, the coach is not there to develop another lifelong friend because you come in and officiate one of the games. But you need to have rapport, right? Which is another way of saying you need to have enough familiarity with each other such that you can have dialogue, you can have conversation. It might be heated conversation, right? It might have a ton of emotion in it, but you need to be able to have enough rapport to be able to have that kind of communication. People ask me if I miss being on the field, and the answer is no. There is one caveat to it. I miss conflict resolution. For some reason, that part of going to the sideline and dealing with an irate coach and trying to get him at least to agree to disagree so that we continue the game, I miss that challenge, and I ask my officials to embrace it. That's not for everybody, but I ask them to embrace it. Going to the different venues. Every venue has its challenges in some way, shape, or form. It might be, and the stadiums have gotten pretty nice, grant you, and we don't see this a lot, but I remember we had a stadium in the conference that was basically the office for the grounds crew. And we used to sit in before games, and I used to find things like these huge rat traps and poison and parts to tractors and all sorts of stuff, right? That was a challenge, But we are very aware of, we've had not myself because I was busy with our own games, but we've had individuals from our office visit both Norman and Austin on game days to understand what their facilities are like, including ingress and egress of the teams and officials and things of that nature. And we know the sidelines are very tight in Norman. By the way, we have a number of officials on our officiating staff that have worked in the Big 12 in the past, and they're familiar with the stadium as well.
2 final questions. We'll start here, then go in the back.
Howdy, AP Stedham, AP Kelly, as we say, at syndicated radio. You mentioned 3 items on, the horns down. It was the taunting, the travesty of the game. Was there the 3rd item? You said 3 items?
Otherwise compromising our ability to manage the game.
Oh, okay. Out of the 16 teams, can you name the teams that don't have a gesture that would not be considered? Is it?
It's a funny question because I am rapidly approaching my 60th birthday, and the clear majority of signals the players get today, I don't understand. Like, if you're asking for me to give you comprehension of what they're doing, you've come to the wrong person, right? They're doing things all the time that just befuddle me, or I have 4 kids myself, ages 30 down to 22, and I might text them, this kid just did this. What's his intent there? You need to educate me. I find it's healthy for me not to go out of my way and try to figure out all the things that they're doing on the field. It gives you some plausible deniability.
Great question. We'll finish up in the back.
Dan Peck, ESPN 106.7. You got to hire like a Gen Z referee or something to teach you the hand signals and everything that the kids are doing these days. So 2 questions. One, you mentioned evaluating Sunbelt officials to possibly be promoted. What are you looking for in a Sunbelt official? And then my other question would be, first season without Coach Saban since you joined the league. Any memories or thoughts of your time working with Coach?
If they're working for me, I'm looking for, first and foremost, their ability to comprehend what we're looking for them, the frameworks of judgment we're expecting them, the mechanics we're asking for them to use, and making sure that they can, a clear majority of the time, use them on the field. It's pressure packed, right? It's one thing to be able to look at some film in a classroom like we'll do next week, or at home in your office and say, that's a foul, that's not a foul. It's another to be able to replicate that like that, in front of 80,000 fans. The Sunbelt guys aren't working in front of 80,000 fans, but you get my point. So I'm looking for the Sunbelt guys. Can they consistently meet or exceed the standards we're asking them to use. If I'm meeting someone from outside of our conference, you didn't necessarily ask this question, but I'll address this. I am looking for some qualities that first and foremost, I'm looking for, this is an important one, I'm looking for individuals that realize the game is not about them, right? I have my officials ask me, John, what's the best way to establish this kind of rapport with the coaches that you're talking about? And I said, you're not going to do it in one Saturday afternoon. You might not even have the opportunity to do it in 3 Saturday afternoons. But if they get a chance to have a game with you 5, 7, or more times, you need to prove to them that the game's not about you. It's about the 2 teams on the sideline, right? You need to prove to them that you're not trying to share in their fame and their spotlight, right? You're trying to be invisible. And the way an individual carries themselves, you can kind of read, you meet them in April at a scrimmage on one of our campuses, you can kind of read into them, right? On whether they think the game's about. I don't mean to be unnecessarily derogatory, but when I watch basketball, I think there's more personalities that have that in them. When I watch some baseball umpires, I think they have some more personalities that are like that. I don't want that in a football game. And memories that, I'm not trying to be evasive by saying this, but when you're an official on the field, you get into a zone, and for me, at the coin toss, and you're not taking in everything that's around you. But certainly when I'm a analytical person by nature. I collect data needlessly, right? I use Microsoft Excel more than the average human being. And I collected statistics and data from all my college assignments since I started doing junior college and Division II all the way up through my last game in the SEC. And one of the things I collected was the crowd size for every game that I have. And I actually have a bar chart from 2001 through 2019, 19 consecutive seasons, what was the average crowd size. And you can see exactly the year that I got into the SEC. It's just, it's the thing about the SEC that struck me compared to where I was before, SEC, a football game is not a 3.5-hour event. It's a weekend event, right? When you're a season ticket holder in the SEC, it's not, I'm going to go travel to my campus for 6 or 7 dates, maybe 8 dates, and be there for 3.5 hours. I'm probably going in Thursday night, Friday morning, and I'm staying till Sunday. It's an event, right? That also has a 3.5-hour football game. And when we showed up on campus, you could feel it. I mean, it was palpable.
Thanks very much, John. Great job.
Great to see everyone. Enjoy your week.